My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life. Welcome to the Duck Milk Prod YouTube channel. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and this live stream is part of a series I'm calling Reading Reviews with Rebecca, which will analyze the critical reception of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice through the negative reviews written by top critics of Rotten Tomatoes, one review at a time. Now, this is not meant to belittle anyone's opinions, but rather serve as a study of art criticism and how we, including myself, discuss film. I'm hoping that this endeavor will encourage us all to be better consumers of cinema. This week, I'll be reading through a review from Us Weekly titled Batman v Superman Review, the eagerly awaited superhero epic is 151 minutes of gloom and doom. And there's a lot of quotation marks in there for some reason. Written by Mara Reinstein or Reinstein. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it, so I'll just be referring to Mara since I'm not exactly sure how to say Mara's last name, so my apologies if I've gotten that wrong. You can click on the link of Mara's review in the video description. I've got it linked below this video, this live stream, if you would like to follow along and read it for yourself, which I encourage you to do just to see it as it is and as it was published. If Mara should ever see this video, I just want to say that I'm aiming to do this as civilly and analytically as possible, and I would ask that anyone watching live or posting in the comments would do the same. I'm simply taking a look at the criticism for and of BVS now from an historical point of view, given that these reviews were used by Warner Brothers in their decision-making process regarding the DC Extended Universe. Due to the poor reviews for Batman v Superman, the tone and approach to the franchise were changed for Justice League and ultimately led to the destruction of the Snyderverse film, 5-film arc that Zack Snyder had planned out. Now, before I get into Mara's thoughts, I'm sure there's some viewers watching this either live or in the replay and thinking, you know, Mara is a professional film critic. What do you have to say about anything, Rebecca? So why should I pay any attention to anything you say? Which I think is a fair question. It's one I would ask if I was not doing this and watching someone else do it. So that is a fair question. So I'm just going to provide a little bit of my background to kind of help explain some of the things that I can bring to the table in terms of art criticism, and hopefully that will fill in some questions if anybody has any. I graduated from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, with a degree in telecommunications and film and a focus on broadcast television production. While I've never been to film school, in my television and production experience, I've learned about and have lots of practice in operating cameras, shot composition, and editing. Lighting, green screen, and audio are my weak spots, admittedly, but I've been working on those. After working in local TV news, running cameras, and working in production, I got a job at Turner, now Warner Media, or whatever they're calling themselves now, for 14 years. I worked with networks, or brands as they call them now, like TBS, TNT, Adult Swim, Cartoon Network, Boomerang, True TV, and Turner Classic Movies as a video encoding specialist. I also did a fair amount of closed captioning work and DVD and Blu-ray QC. In case you are wondering how I podcasted about Supergirl and the DCEU films while working for a Time Warner company, I actually got permission and clearance from my human resources representative. If you think I wouldn't criticize stories that were under the same corporate umbrella, that was never a problem nor a concern for me. If I thought the Supergirl TV series or a DCEU film had faults, I said so. In the last 17 years, I have served as a director, technical director, and camera operator at my local church in a live production capacity. I've been a video editor for 17 years, having worked in Avid, Final Cut, and Premiere Pro CC. In my day job, I shoot and edit news and documentary-style video content that involves interviews and narrative storytelling. I'm also currently an amateur photographer and am aiming to improve my efforts in still photography. You can check out my work over at Instagram at @TheDerbyKid. Link is in the video description below. While discussing these film reviews, music and film scores will inevitably come up. It may be good to know that in my life I have played piano, handbells, clarinet, bass clarinet, bassoon, acoustic guitar, and have even started learning how to play the ukulele. I've played in marching bands, symphonic bands, and wind ensembles, and have sung in many choirs. While I don't consider myself a world-class musician, far from it, actually, I do know some things about music and am a big fan of film scores and soundtracks. In addition to my production and musical experience, I have had lots of experience in art criticism. I've been podcasting about television and film since 2009 and do so on a regular basis with Supergirl Radio, a podcast I co-host about the CW Supergirl TV series. I am also a writing contributor to the Justice League Universe podcast that offers analysis on the DCEU films. You might even hear my voice occasionally in recordings and audio commentaries over there. I'm not an expert, but I care deeply about film, television, storytelling, and art. So I hope this gives you a background on where I'm coming from. All right, now that we have gotten that out of the way, hopefully that'll fill in some gaps if anybody has any questions about my experience in art criticism. So now let's dig into Mara's thoughts and Mara's review. So I'd like to start with the title of the review, which for this one is Batman v Superman Review. The eagerly awaited superhero epic is 151 minutes of gloom and doom. Now, just from looking at this title or headline, however you want to refer to it, this title, I think, is actually making an effort, at least, to be something that catches a reader's eye. So I'll give it credit for that. I'm not sure if Mara came up with the title or if an editor did. Sometimes that is the case. But in my opinion, dwelling on the runtime in the title is silly and superficial. I'm sure that the idea behind the title is to make it seem long and boring and doom and gloom for the whole time. I'm sure that's the vibe that they're trying to go for. But to me, it comes across as if there is no better critique than, oh my God, this film is so long. That to me is a really superficial thing. A film can be really great and be long. Sometimes short films are no good. So that doesn't automatically, a film being long doesn't automatically mean that it's a bad film. So for me, just focusing on the runtime and that be the whole argument is not a very impactful one, in my opinion. But it does make me curious how Mara reacts to films that are longer than Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Some films nowadays are pushing 3 hours long. So I'd be curious to know what she thinks of other films that are not directed by Zack Snyder that are, close to 3 hours long and longer than BBS. I'd be curious about that. Also, I'm curious about the use of gloom and doom. I've always thought people said doom and gloom with the doom part going first. So that was just something I had questions about. But I guess it doesn't really matter. I just thought it was interesting. Also, in my opinion, if you watched Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice and all you got out of it was gloom and doom with the gloom going first, you probably weren't paying attention. And maybe we'll get into it with this review to question whether or not Mara was paying attention. We'll get there. But I don't think maybe Mara was paying attention because, in my opinion, BVS is one of the most hopeful films I've ever seen, and I actually made an entire video on that. So I've got it linked in the video description below if you want to see my thoughts on Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and the hope that it offers in the film. In case you haven't seen it and would like to, I kind of go into a personal story about myself and my cancer journey, I guess, as it were. But that's something very personal to me. So, and it's a shorter video. If you're if you're coming for the live stream that's an hour long, the BBS Hope video is not that long. So it's linked in the video description below if you want to check that out. All right, so now let's get into the body of the review. So Mara starts off with, quote, "Thousands of people have gathered outside the city to catch a glimpse. Suddenly, Superman, the Man of Steel himself, exclamation point within the sentence, is spotted soaring in the sky. Wow, there he is. He soon lands atop a skyscraper. Is he going to save a woman in peril? Help an aircraft land safely, perhaps? Not exactly. He proceeds to ... testify at a Senate committee hearing about nuclear weapons, unquote." Okay, so I'm really confused about this. Is the opening paragraph of the review. So I have lots of questions about this section. Like right away, like immediately I'm having questions. So the first one is really the question that covers the whole thing. What the heck is Mara referring to here? At first, it makes it sound as if she's describing Superman's entrance to the Capitol for the Senate hearing, but he doesn't land on top of a skyscraper there. He actually lands on the ground and then walks up the steps to the Capitol and then walks through the Capitol into the Senate hearing. And Superman goes to testify at a Senate committee hearing about what happened in Africa and some of his other actions around the world. That's what the Senate wants to talk about, is his intervention into political and global situations. They, as far as I was reading that scene, they were not gathering to talk about nuclear weapons. That was never mentioned in the film at all. I'm wondering if Mara is getting Dawn of Justice confused with Superman for the quest for peace. Superman does indeed speak to the United Nations about nuclear weapons in that movie. So I'm curious if there's some confusion about that. It also makes me wonder if Mara actually did watch the film, because sometimes this is so bizarre of a comment that it does make me wonder that maybe Mara missed part of the film, or maybe didn't sit through it, maybe didn't actually watch it, and then just watched a trailer and saw that maybe, or heard about Superman going to the Senate hearing. Maybe she checked out, maybe she went to the bathroom for a long time. I don't know, but it sounds like she missed a part of it and then later assumed because he went to the Senate hearing they were replaying Superman 4: A Quest for Peace, talking about nuclear weapons. Because that is such completely wrong, it does make me wonder what the heck went on there. So that is a very, very strange comment to begin the review, because it's absolutely incorrect about the story of the film. But I will say Superman does land, quote, atop a skyscraper, unquote, in BVS. That part is true. He does it when he goes to confront Lex Luthor. And at that time, he is there because he does indeed save a woman in peril named Lois Lane. So the assumption here that that Mara is writing about, that he doesn't land on top of a skyscraper and he doesn't save a woman in peril. Well, he does. Those are things that actually do happen. Again, I'm wondering if Mara actually watched the film, because I don't know that you would write the insinuation that that doesn't happen when those things did happen. And speaking of aircrafts, because Mara asked the question, help an aircraft land safely, perhaps? Well, he does help save an aircraft of sorts. He rescues Russian astronauts from an explosion, I think on liftoff. That they don't really go into detail about that, but it's what it looks like to me. So there is an aircraft of sorts being saved in the Day of the Dead sequence. So all of that is just very strange stuff. I'm not really sure what they were what Mara was talking about in terms of some of these descriptions of what's going on because it's not correct. So I have lots of questions about that. Okay, so Mara goes on to say, quote, that's just one of the anticlimactic moments in the lackluster Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice opening March 25th. Though hyped for more than a year as a Clash of the Titans epic, the final product is 151 minutes of gloom and doom. Not only is it the anti-Deadpool, it takes itself more seriously than a Best Picture Oscar winner, unquote. Oh my gosh, it takes itself seriously. Oh, how dare it. Okay, so let's go into this. All right, so if we are to assume that Mara is describing the Senate hearing at the Capitol scene, though I'm still confused about that because Mara seems confused about that, did she just describe that scene as anticlimactic? I'm trying to follow the logic of this review, and I'm having a very difficult time. This is like the first couple of paragraphs. So, if we are supposed to go with the logic set forth in the opening paragraph, Mara thinks that the Capitol scene is anticlimactic. That's one of the arguably the most tense scene in the whole film, where a surprise bomb goes off and it kills a lot of people, including the senators and everyone in the hearing, except for Superman. Superman is the only survivor in that room. Mara wouldn't have known this or seen this some of the after effects of that sequence because it's in the Ultimate Edition. There's more information there, but Superman does rescue others affected by the blast. So if her criticism is, oh, Superman doesn't save anybody, he does save people in that sequence, just in the more extended cut, which she probably would not have liked because it's 30 extra extra minutes and she's already having time with 151 minutes. So I don't know that she would have enjoyed that. But so I'm just struggling with trying to figure out Mara's logic here because it does seem like she maybe misunderstood some of this film. Mara also gave us another Marvel comparison to BBS this time, but this one is about Deadpool. This is a new one. We've gotten a lot of Avengers, we've gotten a lot of Joss Whedon mentions. This one is about Deadpool, so this is interesting. But my question is, why would Mara want Batman v Superman to be like Deadpool? Two different characters, two kind of different genres of stories. Even Deadpool is a very outrageous character. He speaks, he breaks the fourth wall. Those are not really things you associate with Batman and Superman, and even the DC universe. They're different universes. Marvel treats their characters a little differently than DC does, and they have different personalities. They tell different stories. Comic books as a genre is not just one thing. They don't all fit in the same box. They're even with the DC universe, there are characters that are very different from each other and they have different personalities, and the stories that are told with those characters are told in different ways. So I don't understand why Mara wants to insist that Batman v Superman is supposed to be Deadpool when they're completely different genres, really. Mara also has a problem with, quote, Batman v Superman taking itself more seriously than a Best Picture Oscar winner, unquote. So maybe, perhaps, just to try to dig into this Deadpool comment a little further, perhaps the Deadpool comment was about Deadpool's lack of taking himself seriously. Maybe Mara just really likes the idea that Deadpool is a character that doesn't take himself very seriously. Maybe she really enjoyed that film. I've never seen it, but it sounds like Mara really enjoyed it, which is great. But just because Deadpool doesn't take itself seriously, that doesn't mean that Batman v Superman can't. And actually, I love that Batman v Superman takes itself seriously. I love the serious take on these characters and treating them as if they matter. Some of the reasons why I don't like the MCU towards after, but it's with Avengers and on that I started having problems with the MCU is that I felt like it turned in the characters in the universe kind of turned into a joke. Everything was a joke. And that was a turnoff for me. I like the idea that these characters are taken seriously and the stories are taken seriously. And so I like that approach to these films and why I'm such a big fan of them. So I just have questions about why is it wrong for a film to take itself seriously? Why is it wrong with aiming to be like a Best Picture Oscar winner? Why every filmmaker should be aspiring to be a Best Picture Oscar winner, even if you're making a like a little short film with your friends in your neighborhood or whatever. Like you should be aspiring to make a good product. You should be wanting to make a good film. If you're going out to make the worst film ever made, that seems like a waste of time to me. I wouldn't want to encourage anybody to do that. If even if you're making something low budget or if you're trying to make something silly and fun, make it the best silly and fun that you can make it. So I think it's awesome that BVS gives Mara the idea that it's taking itself seriously. I love that. I love that Mara thinks that BVS wants to be a contender for Best Picture. I love that. I think that's great. So I don't understand why that there's a problem with that. And also, why couldn't a film using comic book characters do that? Why couldn't it be a Best Picture Oscar winner? If I remember correctly, the Best Picture Oscar nominee list, the number of them was increased when The Dark Knight came out because they wanted to include The Dark Knight in that list. And so that's something that got adjusted because The Dark Knight, a comic book film from DC Comics, from Warner Brothers, got adjusted into that list because it was such a strong contender. And speaking of that, all these Rotten Tomatoes top critics want to bring up The Dark Knight and Christopher Nolan, even though Christopher Nolan was only an executive producer on BBS and really had nothing to do with really much of anything, I think, other than protecting Zack Snyder from Warner Brothers. But he did get an executive producer credit, but he didn't direct BBS. So I'm always perplexed as to why he's really brought up at all. But they always want to shoehorn Christopher Nolan into these reviews. But the one time when it would actually be appropriate to mention The Dark Knight and Christopher Nolan when talking about Best Picture Oscar nominees or Best Picture or Oscar winners in general, Heath Ledger did win an an Oscar award for his performance as Joker, even if it was posthumously, he still won. So even though I really don't like when they bring up The Dark Knight and Christopher Nolan in these reviews because it has nothing to do with the merit of BVS as a film, this would be the time to bring it up when you're talking about comic book films and Oscars and the Oscars because there was an Oscar performance in that film. Of course, now there have even been more Oscar winners and nominees from the comic book world on film, including Suicide Squad winning one for, I think, Best Hair and Makeup. And a lot of them get nominated for special effects and things like that. So it's not rare for a comic book film these days to get nominated or get some Oscar love. Zack Snyder's Justice League just recently got a new Oscar award in a category that was catered to fans, but it still was on the Oscar broadcast, so it did still get some love. So I don't. I guess back in 2016 there was more of an elitist thinking about comic book films and the Oscars, but now it's a little more commonplace. So I think it's a little strange and kind of outdated for Mara to say that BBS taking itself more seriously than an Oscar Best Picture winner. It's a little outdated and overly judgmental. But I'm sort of in my reading of this review, it seems like Mara doesn't seem to have an open mind that a film based on comic books could even dream of being a Best Picture winner. It sounds like Mara just automatically assumes it's based on a comic book. There's no way it could win an Oscar, which I think is maybe not the best approach to it. I think any film, if it's good enough, if it's well made enough, then yeah, it should be maybe considered for an award. Okay, continuing on. Mara writes, quote, Batman gets top billing in the title, but this is essentially a sequel to 2013's equally laborious Man of Steel. Indeed, this film's prologue is a reprise of the final clash or reprise, if you will, of the final clash between Superman, played by Henry Cavill, and General Zod up in the clouds above Metropolis, but from the perspective of the panicked citizens on the ground. But I guess that's the end of the sentence. But from the perspective of the panicked citizens on the ground, for once, the mass destruction on display in countless comic book films has real consequences. Many locals lost their lives that day, while other survivors jumped into action to help. Among them, billionaire businessman Bruce Wayne, a salt and pepper haired Ben Affleck, scowling to perfection. The new POV is quite ingenious, unquote. Mara doesn't seem to have liked Man of Steel. I didn't have time to go through and look at Mara's. Perhaps if she wrote a review of Man of Steel, I'd be curious about her thoughts. But just from her words here, I'm not sure that she liked Man of Steel. But in the same vein, like that has nothing to do with her review of BVS. Really, I don't think, because you can look at Man of Steel as its own film. And yeah, some of Man of Steel plays into Batman v Superman and gives Bruce Wayne his goal and motivation for going after Superman. But the merit of that film, in my opinion, as a person who likes to dig into art criticism, the merit of the previous film has nothing to do with the merit of the film that you're reviewing. And so if it was me, I would try to keep my feelings and my thoughts about that previous film out of the one about the one I'm reviewing currently. So I think that's sort of bad form from Mara, but it seems like she didn't like Man of Steel and is taking some of those feelings into the review about Batman v Superman. So I think that's a little unfortunate. I do appreciate that Mara here recognizes the consequences to the fighting in a comic book film, and how refreshing it is that it's not being skipped over, and those real stakes and the victims in those consequences are not being ignored from showing the consequences and the results of those battles. Mara even goes as far to say that the point of view of showing that is quite ingenious. So I appreciate that Mara, even though Mara didn't like Man of Steel, there's at least some effort to be objective, to say that some of this is good and some of it is well done. So I appreciate that. And it also seems as if Mara liked Ben Affleck's portrayal of Bruce Wayne, and and I'm glad to see that she can point out something that she did like, even though we're going to see that Mara maybe didn't like Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, although still wondering if she actually watched the film. We'll get into it. Okay. So Mara goes on to say, quote, that marks the first and last time you will be able to follow the inner workings of a convoluted screenplay. The story immediately jumps 18 months to an island in the Indian Ocean where natives stumble upon kryptonite rocks. Elsewhere, Superman helps Lois Lane, played by Amy Adams, escape from terrorists in Africa. This too is loosely tied to the kryptonite. Is it? Okay. Continuing on, Mara writes, quote, in Gotham, Bruce uses his vigilante Batman alter ego to plot revenge against Superman. And tech mogul Lex Luthor, played by Jesse Eisenberg, figures out a way to use these events in his favor and lord over all, unquote. All right, so Mara says, quote, follow the inner workings of a convoluted screenplay, unquote. Now, I would agree that some of the theatrical release of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is slightly choppy. And they did have to remove 30 minutes of the film, after all. So I kind of, as a video editor myself, I have some sympathy for that, because they had to cut out 30 minutes that explain some of the storyline a little better. And so when you do that, you have to make decisions about, okay, how do we cut all of that out and save some time in the film, but still make it make sense? So I think, actually, given what they were forced to do, the editors, I don't know if that's just the video editors or Zack Snyder as well, it did always seem like Zack Snyder made some choices on what came out. So what they ended up doing was, I think, actually probably having the knowledge of the Ultimate Edition and what was added back in. I think they actually did a really good job of taking all of that out, and it's still playing in a way that made sense to me, anyway. I wouldn't say that BVS was hard to follow or had a quote convoluted screenplay unquote. Uh, even with that half hour taken out, it was still a story that made sense to me and was something that I enjoyed in the theater. So I don't know what was hard to follow about it. Mara really doesn't go into too much detail specifically about that, but we can kind of make some assumptions based on some of her descriptions of the film. So we'll maybe see if there's more to that. Okay, so the discovery of kryptonite is incredibly important to this film. It's a game changer. Lex Luthor learns that Superman has a weakness. It gives Batman a weapon to use in his fight against Superman. And it gives Superman a way to kill an unkillable monster in Doomsday. So actually going to the Indian Ocean and finding that kryptonite is a really, really, really big deal. Uh, but my question here though is because I'm a little confused. Mara's making me confused by writing her like thinking about this film because what she's getting out of the film I don't think is actually what is in the film. So if anybody has any comments about that, please let me know. But Mara seems to think that the Africa plot is connected to the kryptonite. And my question is why? Why does she think that? I guess maybe when she says loosely connected, maybe it's because those things are both connected to Lex Luthor. Maybe you could get there. I don't know, but Lex Luthor is not in Africa. He doesn't create that situation because he has his goons out there. KG Beast is out there on behalf of Lex Luthor, and the bullet that Lois finds is related to LexCorp. So there are Lex Luthor connections to the Africa sequence, but it's not about the kryptonite, which is why I have a lot of questions. The Africa plotline is there to begin Lex Luthor's framing of Superman and put him on the intention of the world stage for intervening in global affairs. That's what I would say is the connection to Lex Luthor there and why that sequence is important. You find out in the Ultimate Edition more information about that and why people think Superman was involved. But I think for me, I still understood that sequence in the theatrical release, even though the Ultimate Edition, I think, makes it better, makes it cleaner, makes it a little smoother in the understanding of it. But I think it's still something that you can understand in the theatrical cut. The Africa storyline also puts Lois Lane on a journalistic quest, and not even just the journalism part. It also puts her on an emotional character journey that lasts until really the final frame, the final scene of the film. And it's that question of whether or not Superman can love Lois and still be Superman. At the end of the film, the question seems to be answered in the negative. You could argue maybe that no, he cannot be Superman and love her. His love for her led to his ultimate sacrifice and death. Of course, by the end of the film, we know that it's not the end of the story. And in Zack Snyder's Justice League, we can see that he can be Superman and love Lois Lane all at the same time. So that question is starting to be asked because of the Africa sequence, because Superman comes to Africa. He arrives to stop a bad terrorist situation, but it's mostly because Lois is there. And Lex Luthor set that up because he knew that would happen. And that's something that Lois discovers later when she's talking with Swanwick. Maybe Mara's right. Like she initially said that BVS was hard to follow, and I'm starting to think that she's right, that it's difficult to understand because it seems to be difficult to understand to understand for her, because she seems to be having a lot of trouble describing the accuracy and the correct plot line of this film. Because in reading this review, it just seems like she did indeed fail to understand what was actually going on. The things that she is describing here are nowhere near close to actual plots in this film. So maybe she is having some trouble. I personally didn't, but she seems to be having a tough go of it. Let's see. I'm gonna go here in the chat real quick just to see some things. in the chat that have come up because there's some people here, some new folks. So thank you for joining me if you're still watching. Jordan says Chris Nolan is responsible for bringing one of the best Batman trilogies of all time. Uh, like you, the fan, loved The Dark Knight, but not BVS. I'm not sure what that means, Jordan. I agree. Christopher Nolan is responsible for bringing quite possibly the best Batman trilogy of all time. I'm a huge Christopher Nolan film fan. He's one of my favorite directors, and the Dark Knight trilogy is one of my favorite trilogies. I have tons of stuff I of from the Nolan verse. I actually in my office I got this really cool vehicle set where it's like the Bat Pod and the Bat it's just called the Bat in the Nolan verse, the like the Bat Wing essentially, and the Batmobile, and I have those little these little vehicles that are really cute, and they're all together. And I have a Catwoman and Batman figure in my office, and I love the Nolan verse. It's quite possibly one of my favorite just film trilogies of all time, not even just Batman trilogies. But that doesn't have any bearing on Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and the merit of the film and analyzing and reviewing the film. Those things have to be totally separate, in my opinion, because when you're reviewing a film, you really should be technically, in my opinion, this is how I approach things, is you should be looking at the film from the first frame of the film until the end of the credits. That's it. That's all that should be in a film review or a film analysis. So bringing in the Dark Knight trilogy has no bearing on whether or not BVS is a good film. It just doesn't. So that's why I take issue with the bringing up of Christopher Nolan in these reviews. And Justin here seems to want to bring his opinion to the table, saying the Batman is better than Batman v Superman. I am glad that you enjoyed the Batman. I have not seen it myself, so I can't comment on its quality. But I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and I'm sorry you didn't enjoy Batman v Superman. It sounds like, but I would say that Batman v Superman is a quality film and quite possibly a cinematic masterpiece, is what I would argue. So, so that is my opinion. But I'm certainly glad that you have found a Batman film that you like. So I'm not going to begrudge you that comment. It's just up to taste, I guess. But and like I said, I can't comment on the Batman's quality, so maybe a couple months from now I'll understand that a little better once I watch it on HBO Max. But I can't comment on that. But thank you for putting your opinion in the live chat. All right, so continuing on with Mara's review. Let's see. All right. So Mara writes, quote, "We haven't even gotten to Gal Gadot's elusive Wonder Woman yet." And I guess she's going to talk about Gal Gadot's elusive Wonder Woman. Mara goes on to say, quote, "Director Zack Snyder shows no mercy in throwing a slew of disconnected scenes at the audience. Blink and Lois is persuading her Daily Planet editor, played by Lawrence Fishburne, to travel to Washington, D.C. to get answers from a congressman. Blink again, and Superman is staging a rescue in Mexico during its Day of the Dead celebration. He also has time to trek to Smallville to visit his mother, Diane Lane." He flies to Smallville. It's not like it takes him very long to get there. Continuing on with Mara's thoughts. Quote, "Over in Gotham, Bruce uses handy-dandy technology to learn the identity of a beautiful woman played by Gal Gadot, eyeing him at a party. All this big-budget narrative window dressing muddles the basics, such as, who exactly is mad at who and why," unquote. Okay, so this is another instance. This is a couple of this is I think the third instance where Mara seems to not have understood this film at all. So I don't know what Mara was doing. It feels like maybe she fell asleep at one point. It is a long film, so maybe she came into it like haven't had a lot of sleep coming into it. Maybe she fell asleep, or maybe she went to the restroom, and while she was at the restroom, maybe she went to the concession stand, or maybe she saw somebody she knew in the lobby and they got to talking, and then maybe she came back in and missed a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know, but something happened in Mara's screening of this film. So what I think Mara considers to be, quote, disconnected scenes, unquote, are actually part of the film's plot and all play important aspects of the plot. So Mara talks about Lois and Perry. Lois actually persuades Perry to travel to Washington. Which ends up, because of that, it puts her in the right place to speak with Secretary Swanwick, where she learns about Lex Luthor's connections to Africa via the bullet that she's been investigating. And it puts her in the location to be present outside of the Capitol bombing, where she's a witness to those events. So I think the idea, it's not just like she gets Perry to fly her to Washington for no reason. There's a reason for that. She goes to Washington for her job. She's actually doing an investigation in Washington, D.C., and learning important things, which actually play into her subplot and to her character. So, so I don't know why that's disconnected. It's very much connected. And then Mara thinks that Lois spoke to a congressman while she was in Washington, D.C. What? What? The only Congress people that we see in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice that we interact with are Senator Finch, played by Holly Hunter, and then the other senator, the other senator who has a situation, a little moment with Lex Luthor at LexCorp. So those are the only two senators we really get to know, and the only Congress people that we actually spend time with. I think what Mara thinks happened is that when Lois, again, I'm trying to interpret what Mara thought this film was doing. I think Mara thought that Lois, when she was talking to Swanwick, was talking to another congressperson. But that's not the case at all. We find out that General Swanwick is actually now Secretary of Defense. So maybe if Mara had paid a little bit more attention, she would know that Swanwick was actually a military leader and actually discussing things with the president and not a congressman. What in the world? It's just the most bizarre thing. It's just so strange to me. Then Mara says that we can't figure out, quote, who exactly is mad at who and why, unquote. I'm trying not to make this personal. But it's actually shocking to me that a professional film critic who is being paid to do this for a living cannot understand who is mad at who and why in BBS. To me, it's pretty clear. Like those things, you understand Bruce's motivation, or at least me. I understand Bruce's motivation. I understand Clark's motivation. I understand Lois's motivation. I understand Lex's motivation. I understand Senator Finch's motivation. I understand what's going on. I don't understand why it's so hard for her not to be able to understand. So this is very strange to me. But Mara seems to be having many difficulties with understanding the film, and I want to know what her experience watching this film in the theater was like. I want to know what happened when she screened this film, because I don't know. I think it reads like she's checked out. Because it's not that complicated. It really isn't. Okay, so Mara goes on to say, quote, and yet Snyder botches the only scene fans truly crave: the fight between the classic superheroes. After an intriguing teaser in which Batman snarls to Superman, "Do you bleed? You will." The brawl is a head-scratching letdown. These are two extraordinary men plagued by tormented souls. Mommy issues should not be a make-or-break factor. And in parentheses, it says, "This is not a spoiler, I swear," in parentheses. You may not even be capable of seeing the duel as it's staged in pitch black in the pouring rain. The first Spider-Man movie aside, is that cliche backdrop ever effective? Unquote. I have some questions. Why can't mommy issues be a make or break factor, especially when one of these characters has severe trauma over not being able to save his mother when she was gunned down in the street right before his very eyes, and the other one never knew his biological mother at all, who actually and the reason that he didn't know his biological mother is because she blew up when his entire planet and his entire civilization and culture and his people were destroyed. I think mommy issues for both Clark and Bruce are actually pretty character correct. And add on top of that, Martha Kent has been kidnapped and threatened to be burned to death by Lex Luthor. So that seems like mommy issues should maybe come into play here. And I think it's actually a good use of it in the writing. And the reason that Mara says in parentheses, this is not a spoiler, I swear, in parentheses, I think is related to the issue that we find a lot of these top critics in, where they were asked by Zack Snyder in a message before the film was screened not to spoil some aspects of the film to preserve the experience for fans. And these critics, some of them are really agitated about having been asked that. Oh, how dare you tell me what I can and cannot write, even though critics are all the time asked to do that kind of thing. But Mara seems to be trying to play it safe, saying, oh, this is not a spoiler. It's actually a spoiler. Mara, that's a spoiler. The people who read it in 2016 at the time, on March 22nd, 2016, may not have understood it now, but that's definitely a spoiler when you read it afterwards. So I don't think Mara was really playing the game there. Okay, I'm going to stop down for a second. Let's see. Oh no, I've got more to say about this paragraph. I'll finish this paragraph and we'll get back in the chat. Okay, so Mara, just to remind you, who is a professional film critic, mentions that the big fight happens at night in the pouring rain, but never bothers to ask why or analyze why the big fight takes place during that time of day and in a thunderstorm. Why would that happen? These are intentional choices by the screenwriter and the director. It's not as if they couldn't have done it during the day and in a day where it wasn't raining or storming. They could have done it that way, but they chose to do it at night in the rain and in the storm. Why? Those are questions as a film critic that those people should be asking. I know I talk about it all the time on these reviews. Well, maybe not all the time, but I feel fairly confident that I mentioned it before. And this is why I think a lot of the way I do it, there's a lot of influences which help me understand how to be uh, uh, I guess a film critic, if you want to label that on me. I don't really like the idea of film criticism. I like art criticism. I like the idea that you can analyze something. I would rather be known as somebody who analyzes film, not necessarily critiques it. Even though sometimes that's what I do here on this channel. But I like to bring up, and this is something you can probably find on YouTube, but Roger Ebert asking Alfred Hitchcock about his use of stairs. Brilliant. Brilliant. Alfred Hitchcock has used stairs in such a way that Roger Ebert noticed something was up with the stairs. Why would you use stairs in such a way? That is somebody who is a professional film critic. That is somebody who cares about film. That is somebody who gave a crap and actually put some effort into being a film critic. And that's why Roger Ebert is considered one of the greats. I disagreed with him quite a bit sometimes, but I had a lot of respect for him, and still have a lot of respect for him when I read through some of his older reviews. Because that example is just such a good one, that when I think of film critics, I want somebody to be asking the questions about the intention behind the scenes. What was the filmmaker trying to do? What are you trying to say with what you're doing in the scene? I could look at the big fight in the rain and think it's a perfect choice. Bruce Wayne and Batman is angry. What's a better weather way to show somebody's anger? Lightning, thunderstorms, crashes, thunder crashes. What's a better way to show the sadness of things that's going on, especially when the idea that like Batman is going to try to murder Superman? Rain symbolizes tears, sadness, especially when you're about to go into that big fight that's going to lead into the big fight with Doomsday where Superman dies. Rain, sadness. So to me, that's a really easy way to explain that's how I read that film, read that scene in the film. And to me, it makes perfect sense as to why they chose to do it at night and in the rain. It's not just a cliche. It's a way to visually show what's going on with the characters. And maybe some people think it's cliche, but I think it works. I think it helps me understand what's happening with the characters, and gives more emphasis to what they're going through at the time. So Mara might think that's cliche, but when you actually start asking questions about that kind of thing and looking at it in terms of what was meant behind it, it opens up a lot of doors and understanding it. So I just find that kind of comment very superficial. I In reading that, I'm guessing that Mara didn't spend a lot of time thinking about this film. And that's disappointing to me. I think maybe this could have been a better review if maybe Mara had spent a little more time digging into these things. Um so it's mind-boggling to me that this professional film critic who gets paid for this kind of thing. I do this for free. I do this cuz I like it, and I can maybe do it. Maybe it's egotistical to say, but maybe I could do a better job. And I'm just doing it for free and for fun. Uh, but it's disappointing to me that a professional film critic never wonders why. Why did the filmmaker and the screenwriter do that? Why? Asking the question why is the best tool you've got in your analysis if you want to be a film critic or somebody who reviews things. Always ask the question why. Let's see if I can address anything that's in the chat at the moment. Let's see. Pete White Strake says Terrio and Snyder really pushed all the characters to the limit and they developed in the end. I agree. I think that's a great way to put that. Let's see. Oh, this is a good question. Sci-Fi Lullabies asks, I wonder what this film critic thought of the final dark and rainy battle between Deckard and Batty and Blade Runner. Oh my gosh, yes, Blade Runner. What a fantastic film. Um, uh, the sequel, I guess, it was good. It was good, but the first Blade Runner, God, so good. Yeah, that film is dark, and I think it's intended to be so because it's kind of getting you into that world of how things have changed in the world, and it also makes it available for like neon lights and kind of pretty colors when you can do it in the dark. But yeah, I mean, a lot of that, there's rain, it's dark. There's definitely a lot of that in Blade Runner, but dang it, that's a good film. So yeah, when somebody dismisses something just because, "Oh, I don't like that it was dark and rainy," but then they don't think about why that is the case. I've only watched that first Blade Runner once, but I'd like to go revisit it to really dig into that kind of stuff. So it's been a little while since I watched it, but yeah, we could probably talk about Blade Runner and dig into the whys of why it's dark and why it's rainy and why that sets the tone for those characters in the world that they're living in. So yeah, and David says Blade Runner also got trashed in 1982. Surprise, surprise. I'm not surprised by that at all. Just because some of these critics, they're just so superficial about it. And then David asks, yeah, I think the first Blade Runner didn't have any daytime scenes at all. I'd have to go and revisit that. I cannot say for sure at the moment. I'd have to go back and rewatch it. But yeah, it is a lot of it takes place at night or like indoors. So you don't see a lot of the daytime. But I think that says a lot about the world that those characters, it's kind of uh, I don't know what the best word to describe that. I'd have to think on that. That it would be it's a world that's it doesn't seem like there's a lot of direction for some of those characters. Like they're kind of spinning their wheels. At least Harrison Ford's character, I think, is spinning his wheels for most of the film, and it's just it his characters doesn't seem to have a lot of motivation in a lot of respects. And so I think the that atmosphere, I think, is a good one for his character. So yeah, that's definitely a film I want to get back into, and maybe that'll be a film that I've been thinking about. So this is kind of unrelated to BBS and this project I'm doing right now, but I was thinking about things that I might want to do after this BBS project is finished. And one of the things I wanted to do was continuing to practice film criticism in terms of like art criticism, not just like critiquing and hating on a film, but actually digging into layers of the writing and the cinematography and the direction and the acting and all that kind of stuff. And so I kind of want to do a series of videos doing that. And some of them would be like my favorite films that I watch all the time. And maybe it would be films that I haven't watched a lot, but that I go back and rewatch. And maybe Blade Runner would be a great one to do it with, because I really liked it. But I think I need to do more investigation into it just to really pay attention to kind of what the direction was trying to achieve there. Okay, so that gives me a good one that I'm going to add to my list of things that I want to do. Let's see. There's a lot of good Blade Runner talk in the chat. Thanks, guys. Sci-Fi Lullaby says there are parallels between Blade Runner and BVS in the final scene between Batman and Superman, a human fighting a superhuman in an abandoned, dilapidated building. Oh, good words there. And then Pete White Strake says some people only take and see these characters at the face value. They never see the long journey these characters have to take to be the idealistic personality we all know and love. Yeah, that was kind of the idea behind Zack Snyder's 5 film arc. He had plotted out this big arc for Superman, and it would have involved a lot of twists and turns for his character. And we know what the whole thing was gonna be. I think it probably changed a little bit as they were going in, because there was a whole subplot that was supposed to happen between Lois and Bruce, which honestly I would have hated. So I'm glad it seems like they changed that. Even though I know what he was going for, he was kind of going for like a whole King Arthur and Guinevere and all of that with Lancelot. I think he was going for that, but you don't have to like follow that to a T. You can still have some of that and kind of play with it. So I probably would not have liked that, but it seems like according to Zack Snyder's Justice League, they changed that. So if he did continue that 5 film arc, if he got the opportunity to do that, I don't think he would have done it as we saw in those big storyboards that were released at the Dallas exhibit that I actually went to. And I need to make a little video about that. I never did. So maybe sometime down the road I'll do that. But yeah, so that was the idea behind his 5 film arc, that he was going to gradually get Superman by the end of that to be the Superman that everybody expects him to be. And I would have been fine with that. I would have been into that. That was what I was so excited about with Zack Snyder's take on Superman, is that he was willing to take his time with Superman. And he really made these films largely about Superman. And as a Superman fan, I was really excited about that. But some people don't, from my experience and what I've kind of observed on the internet and in real life, is that some people don't have the patience for that. They just want him to be like this all-knowing, hopeful, which they categorize hopeful as just optimistic and always never questioning anything. Everything is just fine all the time, no problems, knows everything, handles everything correctly all the time. They want him to be that like right away. And to me, that feels false. It even feels false. It's always felt false in the Christopher Reeve films. And the reason that those films even marginally make that work is because they skip a whole bunch of time, and he goes from like a teenager to just like perfect Superman on day one. And so I was really excited about the idea of the 5 film arc. And so the fact that it got at least paused for now, hopefully, I don't know any information. I still have that hope that maybe one day we'll get to see that story be told in some form, whether it be a comic book, which I would be fine with, or an animated feature. I think that would be awesome. You could do a lot of stuff in animation you may not be able to do in live action. So I'd be fine with that too. I'd love to do live action, but if that can't happen, I hope they'll be able to tell that story in some genre, some format. But I would have been excited to see what was going to happen with that. So it's unfortunate that it didn't. But let's continue on with the review, because that's why we're here. All right. So Mara continues to say, quote, "The metaphorical darkness It seems like Mara did understand that the darkness was metaphorical, but didn't really care about it. So Mara says, quote, the metaphorical darkness is more problematic. If the success of the delightfully twisted Deadpool proved anything, it's that moviegoers prefer their comic book picks bright and loose with a side of self-knowing wit. And in parentheses, it says that winning combination also worked for Guardians of the Galaxy and the Avengers flicks. You could even make a case that Christopher Nolan's superb Batman trilogy reached its apex with The Dark Knight due to Heath Ledger's Livewire Joker, a popcorn film, and this is a popcorn film, should never feel like a Sunday night homework. Read, this is not the place to introduce a storyline such as the mystery behind the delivery of arms to rebels in Africa. When real life news personalities, including Anderson Cooper and Nancy Grace, pose deep existential questions about whether Superman should be viewed as a god, it comes as pontificating blather, unquote. Okay, so I made a whole list of notes about this paragraph, but now I'm seeing things I really want to talk about. We'll get to all that. Okay, so this is not the place to introduce a storyline such as the mystery behind the delivery of arms to rebels in Africa. That's a whole storyline. That's a whole storyline related to Lex Luthor's character, where he's continually trying to frame Superman in the eyes of the public. And he does succeed at one point because people are like burning effigies of Superman and really mad at him. And they're protesting him outside of the Capitol. And he even has to go to a Senate hearing because Lex Luthor's stuff is starting to work. And the Senate is questioning him. That's not just like not there for a reason. It's there for a reason. There's a reason for that. Lois Lane's storyline is started in Africa, and that goes until the end of the film. It's not as if it's not there for a reason. There's a reason for that. It even plays into Superman and Lois's relationship. I don't understand why Mara thinks that's not a big deal, that it's not something that's intentionally put there for a reason. That is so annoying to me. And then also, Mara says that when real life news personalities, including Anderson Cooper and Nancy Grace, pose deep existential questions about whether Superman should be viewed as a god, it comes off as pontificating blather, unquote. Well, why can't there be newscasters questioning these things? Why can't you put that in there? I think that's perfectly acceptable to show the perspective. Now I'm getting a little riled up. I got to calm myself down. But I think it's actually really cool to see the perspective of the news media, even though I don't really care much that for CNN, because CNN is connected to Warner Brothers via the parent company. That's the reason they have CNN personalities here. But Jon Stewart is also shown talking about Superman. I love the idea that it's not just like this little story. This story exists within the broader world. It exists in a place that feels real to us. And that's the intention behind the Snyderverse, is that he's treating these characters as if this was a thing that actually happened, that this was a thing that we might actually experience in our real world. And I think that's so cool. In the Avengers films that Mara keeps bringing up, and Deadpool, that Mara loves Deadpool. Great for Mara. But those films don't feel like things that could actually happen. Those things feel like they exist in like a little cartoonish bubble and not like the real world. And so I think that's the difference. And I actually love that it engages deep existential questions. That's one of the things I love about BVS, is that it makes me think. It makes me think through the words of Lex Luthor when he talks about Epicurus and the problem of evil. I love that. I love it so much. And maybe that's difficult for Mara to think about. She don't want to do homework. She don't want to do Epicurean homework. Who wants to do philosophical homework? Oh my God, this is just a popcorn film. I disagree. I love that. I love that about BBS. And that's one of the reasons that I like the Snyderverse, is because it not only treats these characters as if they were real, but it respects them. It respects them enough to ask those questions and to put those questions, those deep existential questions, on these characters, because they can take it. They can take it. These are characters who, in the DC universe, are kind of treated as gods. They are treated as these pillars who are above us. They're just larger than life. And so for these characters to think about those things and present those ideas to us, that we're thinking about those things through these characters, Man, that's cool. I love that. I love that about BBS. So I don't know. Mara and I are just different people. You know, respect to Mara. She wrote a review for Us Weekly, and I never have. So respect to her on that. But we're very different people when it when it comes to looking at these things. Okay, so now that I've gotten that out of the way, let me get to the other parts of this paragraph. So Mara really loves Deadpool. Let's just talk about that right now. Mara just loves her some Deadpool. She also mentions Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers in here to further her point. Um, but in my opinion, the DC universe doesn't have to be like the Marvel universe, and films on them don't have to be like that either. I don't know why she thinks that DC has to be like Marvel. That's not a thing that anyone requires them to do. I guess except for WB when they redid Justice League and added a whole bunch of Marvel stuff to it. Not the best decision. See, that kind of just furthers my point. They should be treated differently. Okay, and so Mara also says, "quote Moviegoers prefer their comic book picks bright and loose with a side of self-knowing wit." Unquote. How does she know that? How can she speak for everyone? I don't think that. I think there are some characters who that can work with, like a Deadpool, like maybe even a Shazam. I think it's perfectly fine for certain characters to be like that, but I don't think every character in every c- comic book film should be bright and loose with a side of self-knowing wit. Um, I don't know. I don't think that's applicable to every film that's based on a comic book. And also because a film is successful in one way, like the MCU, you can't you can't make another film based on a comic book a different way. You can't do that. Is that what Mara's saying here? Does Mara only want films to be one way? Um, because that's what you'd end up with if you're making that argument. If you say that, oh well, moviegoers prefer this, then you're going to get all movies like that. And what we've seen now from an historical point of view is that it didn't quite work out. You make a Justice League DC film like you would an MCU film with the guy who made MCU films, and it didn't work. People didn't like it, and it didn't make any money, and it was a complete failure. So I think Mara here has been proven incorrect by history. Let's see. There's also another mention of Christopher Nolan in the Dark Knight trilogy because reasons for whatever. And then this is another bone of contention that I have with Mara's review. Mara says, "quote a popcorn film," and then emphasizes, "and this is with is italicized, a popcorn film. Should never feel like Sunday night homework." Unquote. I wholeheartedly, 100% disagree with this assertion. To me, a quote popcorn film is to me when I think of that phrase and that term, it's a movie you can go watch or see in a theater in which you can kind of just turn your brain off while watching. These can be comedic films for the sake of making you laugh, or they can be action packed thrillers with just a bunch of explosions. Um, so you can think of popcorn films just turning your brain off. You're just there to eat popcorn. You just want to watch a movie and eat popcorn. So that's how I would describe a popcorn film. BVS does have comic book characters in it, yes, but I think it's much more in line with films that would be put in the category of drama. This is not necessarily just a popcorn film, even though I did eat a lot of popcorn while I watched it. Every time I watch it, I eat popcorn because I just really like eating popcorn while watching films. But I would put it firmly in the category of drama. I also would categorize it as a political thriller. And I even saw today on Twitter somebody saying, well, I don't know why BVS is called a political thriller. It involves a lot of politics. There's a lot of political stuff in there. And it is a thriller. There's a lot of action that goes along with those political things. So I would in fact categorize it as a political thriller. So I don't think I would put a film that check those box in a category and call that a popcorn film. I would say like the Transformers movies are popcorn films. Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, popcorn films. Um, Even though Jurassic Park is like one of the greatest films ever made, in my opinion, it's still a popcorn film. Indiana Jones movies, popcorn films. Although Last Crusade, some thinkers. I might talk about that sometime on my channel because I love Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, but popcorn movie. So those are very, very different kinds of movies. Not to say that popcorn films can't be good or thought provoking or mean something to you. Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade definitely has meaning for me, but they're just different. They're films that have different goals attached to them by the filmmakers, and that's what I think sets it apart. If Zack Snyder wanted Batman v Superman to be a film you had to think about, like doing some homework, then that's what the film is going to be. You're not the filmmaker, Mara. I hate to tell you, but Zack Snyder wanted to be a film that was thought provoking and actually made the viewers think and actually treated the audience as if we were smart. And I appreciate that. Um, it can be a more intellectual film if it wants to be. If that's the intent behind the screenwriter and the filmmaker, I there's nothing wrong with it aiming to be a more intellectual film. Uh, and what's funny about the history of all of this is that letting critics like Mara dictate what a film can or cannot be is why we ended up with Justice League. So I don't really think that we should let critics dictate what films should be. I think the filmmakers and the screenwriters should dictate what a film should be. And we should just be able to receive it and make our own decisions about what we think about it. And that's our job as the audience. And this is another instance that we've seen a couple of these in this series that I'm doing. It's another instance of a film critic trying to put a film into the box of their choosing, that the film critic decides what a film can and cannot be based on what they want it to be, and not actually analyzing the film for what it is. Analyzing a film based on what it is and what it does is actually Mara's job. That's what she should be doing. But here in this review, she's writing her review on what she wants it to be. She wants it to be more like Deadpool. So that's how she's approaching it. All right. So continuing on, quote, maybe a standout snarky villain would have helped the cause, but Eisenberg's Lex Luthor is terribly miscast. The actor plays him like an overcaffeinated Mark Zuckerberg, all twitchy and bratty. He's got billions and drones on and on about his thirst for power. So what? He's a diminutive twerp. The super bluff and glowering Affleck and Cavill look like they can overtake him with one half-hearted punch to the gut. Oh boy. And then parentheses, wonder, in parentheses, end quote. All right. So let's get into this. All right. So Mara describes Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor as overcaffeinated, twitchy, bratty, thirsty for power, and a diminutive twerp. Those are all the descriptions that she gives Lex Luthor. But she never takes the time to bother. She never takes the time to analyze the character as to why he's being played that way. Why is he written that way? What might have happened in his life, or what might have happened in the storyline of BVS to make him that way? Why is he that way? There must be a reason for that. Why is he written that way? Why does Jesse Eisenberg play him that way? There must be a choice behind that. Ask the question why? Why? But Mara here is not even the slightest bit curious to look into why Lex Luthor, who is smaller than Batman and Superman, actually ended up outsmarting both of them and manipulated both of them, and ended up being responsible for the death of one of them. So talking about Lex Luthor is just a diminutive twerp, neglects to mention the fact that he outsmarted all of them except for Lois Lane, and got away with it. He got arrested, but for the most part, he played everybody for fools, and he had his way until Lois Lane had all the proof on him, and he got arrested. But that's what I think is so cool about this version of Lex Luthor, is he might have been a diminutive twerp. but he ended up kind of winning in the end. And actually, I wish I could find the interview from, I think there were a couple of interviews that I watched way, way back in the day. But I remember hearing Jesse Eisenberg and Henry Cavill both talking about the physicality and the differences, the physical differences between Superman and Lex Luthor. And I think I think it was Henry Cavill that kind of talked about it, and the idea that Superman is big. He's a big guy. He's a very imposing figure. He's got a lot of muscles, and he's a big guy. And Lex Luthor is this kind of scrawny guy. Wears some suits that are too big for him. He wears sneakers, and he looks small compared to Superman. Uh, but it's kind of a play on the perspective from Lex Luthor a little bit, that he would see Superman, and maybe this was something that Jesse talked about. I can't remember exactly. I wish somebody could find that interview for me because I looked for it today. Um, but Jesse kind of likened Superman, according to Lex Luthor's point of view, as kind of a bully. It's kind of like that high school jock that would maybe lock you in a lock you in one of the lockers. And I like that idea, that playing of perspectives, in terms of, some people see Superman as this hero and this good guy, but from Lex's perspective, he sees him as just like that bully from high school that was maybe bigger than him. And so I like the idea of that, and I think having them be so different physically, I think is really interesting, because Lex Luthor cannot defeat Superman based on physicality, he has to beat him intellectually. And I think that's actually that's very character correct for Lex Luthor. I know some people wanted him to be kind of like the Superman, the animated series Lex Luthor, where he's kind of a big dude. But I think it's actually a much more interesting take that he is a diminutive twerp and a little bratty. But I think that's what makes him such a compelling villain in this version of the story. I also think it's funny that Mara thinks that she is being clever and witty by writing quote boy and then putting quote wonder unquote in parentheses to make a Robin joke. But given that she clearly has no actual understanding of these DC characters, and just kind of prefers Marvel and wants them just to be Marvel characters, her little joke falls a little flat to me. And so I don't think it kind of lands like she thinks that it does. Let's see. I'm going to hop back in the chat real quick because we're almost finished. Yes, we're almost finished. So I'm going to hop in the chat real quick. All right, so lots of good comments here. So thank you guys for sticking with me. Sci-Fi Lullaby says there is no hero's journey if Superman is automatically a perfect hero. Superman is learning to become the character we all know, and Batman has fallen and strayed from the character we all know. Yeah, and I agree with both of those points, and I think it's really cool that everybody wanted Superman to be this character we aspire to. Well, by the end of BVS, Batman looks to Superman to find faith, to find inspiration and hope. And I think it's cool that Superman actually was a beacon of hope in that instance, that he gave Batman hope even in his death. And so I think that for me, that satisfies that need to see Superman as a beacon of hope. Let's see. David asks, where would you put a media coverage moment in Zack Snyder's Justice League? It might actually be difficult as the final battle happened in an abandoned region. Yeah, that's a good question. I think that would have had to involve probably Lois Lane a little bit more. So I might have, like, if it was my film, which it wasn't, but I think you probably could have had a situation where Lois is trying to follow the events of what's going on, and maybe she's back at the Daily Planet, or trying to figure out where they went, or maybe she's communicating with them, with the Justice League, and figuring out what they're doing and what their plan is. And so maybe you could kind of address the media response through Lois Lane in that instance. So that's maybe how I would have approached it, but you maybe necessarily don't need it necessarily there, but I think they do a good job of kind of showing the world after Superman's death, and kind of the world without Superman. So I think that sort of fulfills that portion of it for me. Let's see. Pete Whitestrake says every scene in BBS has a reason. Some people maybe unconsciously refuse to see it because they got used to superhero flicks that are more action, more humor, but less story. Yeah, I think some people when they saw BBS, they were kind of having to adjust to having to actually think about a plot instead of it being like a film. I don't want to say in the Marvel universe, but definitely in the Marvel universe where it would hold your hand. BVS doesn't hold your hand. BVS counts on you to be a smart viewer to make those dots and make those connections without having to explicitly tell you everything. And I think that was jarring for some people. Let's see. P Whitestrake also says that's the thing. Let DC be different to add variations. We learned from Western movies back then. Too many Westerns did the same thing and felt the same. Then it got boring and the audience got bored of it. Yeah, even the MCU recognized it. There's a famous quote from I think it's Kevin Feige, or maybe it was Kevin Feige quoting the Russo brothers talking about how like chocolate ice cream is great. We all love chocolate. Well, some people don't. People who probably are missing out on life don't like chocolate ice cream, which I feel bad for them about. But let's just say, for example, like we all love chocolate ice cream. We eat chocolate ice cream too much, we might get sick of chocolate ice cream and want another flavor. Um, I haven't really tested that theory too much because I feel like I would always like chocolate ice cream no matter what. But the idea of that is if you give people too much of the same thing over and over again, they are going to get tired of it. And so it's best to change it up. And even the MCU did that. Um, so even the MCU that was so formulaic for so long eventually realized like we have to change something. We have to do something different. All right, so going back into the wrap up to this review, Mara writes, quote, Dawn of Justice isn't just a movie, by the way. It's also the dawn of a new high stakes cinematic DC Comics universe. And she puts DC D period C period, which is interesting, in which characters such as Wonder Woman, The Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg all get their own standalone features. This is outdated because Cyborg is not getting that treatment. And The Flash, I don't believe is ever going to come out. I just, I'll be surprised if it actually actually comes out in theaters. It's been pushed back and delayed for so long. But the last sentence from Mara is, quote, alas, as of now, this franchise desperately needs saving, unquote. All right. So reading a final paragraph like this makes me think that top critics such as Mara, it reads like she knew she had the power to sink these films as they were coming out. Since Mara here is very clearly more of a Marvel fan, loves Deadpool. Mara loves Deadpool. It does make me a little suspicious that she didn't just want that maybe she didn't want things to compete with some of her faves like Deadpool and the Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy. There's just a little bit of me that's a little bit of a conspiracy theorist on here because it seems like she's writing this review not necessarily to analyze the film, not to get it correct, not to understand the film, but to critique it in such a harsh way that it would make things worse for the DC universe. That's how it comes across to me. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe that's not Mara's intention. Maybe Mara really went into this like, I'm giving it my all. Maybe, I'll try to be generous in that. But to me, it seems like Mara went into this knowing kind of the power she had over this film. Because they did. The Rotten Tomatoes critics had power over this film, and they got what they didn't like canceled, for a lack of a better word. They got it changed because they were loud and obnoxious about it. That's what happened. That's just a fact. Okay, and then also there's a couple other things I wanted to address, and it also comes across to me as if Mara recognizes that a lot of what was riding on BBS, like she seems to know that a lot of things were riding on this film, and if she didn't want Zack Snyder, if she didn't like and want what Zack Snyder was putting out there, all she had to do was complain about it a lot and write a lot of negative things about it, and maybe she could do something to help this movie sink. That's just the way it reads to me. It doesn't seem like a genuine good faith review. It just seems like somebody trying to make it as negative as possible in order to make the film come across as bad. And history tells us that she was successful. She and these other critics who did this kind of thing they were successful. Reviews like this caused changes for Justice League and led to Joss Whedon taking over. And when that happened, the DC universe kind of fell apart in terms of its connection. There are some standalone films that came out since and are going to come out again, but the connectiveness of the DC universe is not there anymore. And the reason that I say that these film critics did have that power and that sway is that a lot of the things that are mentioned in these reviews are the exact changes that happened with Justice League. The reviews mentioned Joss Whedon. They wanted Joss Whedon. They wanted funny. They wanted colorful. They wanted daytime. All of this stuff is what we see in Justice League. So it almost seems like they took these reviews, WB took these reviews, and they just rewrote it and reshot it based on the critical reception. That's the way I read it. That's what I come away with in my analysis of it, is that Justice League is actually the result of these reviews. That's what I think. Having examined a good portion of them and doing this project, that's just the history of it, in my opinion. I also think, just as a final thought, for me, it's hard to take the words, quote, "this franchise desperately needs saving," unquote. It's hard for me to take those words seriously when the reviewer who wrote this piece didn't understand nearly anything about the film she was actually writing about. So how does she know it needs saving when she didn't actually understand the film? So that's kind of my thought there. I guess that's going to do it for this reading review with Rebecca live stream. I hope you enjoyed reading through Mara's review and Us Weekly. If you missed this live, but of course, thank you to everyone who did join me live. So thank you for hanging out with me. But if you did miss this live, I hope you'll consider sharing your thoughts in the comment section below. If you ever have any questions about when I'm going to be live, just check out this YouTube channel, youtube.com/duckmilkprod. I'll be scheduling streams in advance when I'm available. Sometimes I have to take a Sunday night off, but I'll let you know when I schedule when I'll be available and when I'm going to do the live stream. So just click on Get Reminder, and it will remind you when I go live. And since we talk a lot in these live streams about reviews that maybe weren't the best, I'm always looking for reviews about BVS that are done well, even if they are negative. If they are written well, if they make good points and have arguments to back up their points, those are things that, or bring up good points. If they have a fresh perspective on the film, if you know of a review that you want to share with the class, just leave me a comment with possibly a link if you can make it work. I know it's been a little difficult for David, who joins us here in the live chat. Sometimes David has had trouble with just linking a review. So if you do have any trouble with that, just let me know. Maybe you can just type out the title of it and I'll search for it. But leave me a comment if you have a review that you want to share that you think is written well or done well. It's good to take a look at reviews that are not done well, and that reviews that are done well. And so I just want to share those with everybody. So if anybody has any they want to share, please share them in the comments below. Let's see. I'm doing some fundraisers. I think I have a link to my friend Mike's fundraiser for Make-A-Wish. It's in the video description. So if you have a chance to help him out, my friend Mike is a big DC fan. He got me hooked on Teen Titans. He's the reason that Donna Troy is one of my favorite comic book characters. And he also taught me a lot about the Death of Superman storyline and actually encouraged me to read it back in the day. So if you want to help out a fellow DC fan, give him a little bit of love in his Make-A-Wish charity link, because he's trying to raise a lot of money for them. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for me. So I'm going to give this live stream over to voiceover Rebecca, and she is going to take us out of here. If you would like to see more of these live streams, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel at youtube.com/duckmilkprod. If you'd like to keep in touch with me personally, you can follow me on Instagram at TheDerbyKid and on Vero at DerbyKid. You can hear my thoughts on the CW Supergirl TV series and all things Kara Zor-El over at Supergirl Radio by visiting supergirlradio.com, subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts, or subscribing to the DC TV Podcast YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/DCTV Podcasts. Also, please check out the Justice League Universe podcast for in-depth analysis on the DCEU films, including Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And before I go, I hope that this live stream video series will inspire you to think more critically and thoughtfully about film and storytelling. I'd like to leave you with this quote from C.S. Lewis's book titled An Experiment in Criticism. "The truth is not that we need the critics in order to enjoy the authors, but that we need the authors to enjoy the critics." My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life.